uncovered. Today, we're going to talk about life lessons that pole dancing has taught us. So obviously, when you're in pole, sometimes it is your life, really, when you're involved in it. And when you've been in pole for a while, like, you seem to be so involved in the community and then realize, wow, this is actually so much more than just a sport. It's so much more than just a hobby. At least for me anyway, and Steph, I guess there's been so much that we've learned. Like, I've grown up through pole. When I started, I was 21, maybe.
You must have been younger.
I was 19. I was like, I don't even remember. I keep saying it's almost 10 years that I've been poling, or about 10 years this year. So yeah, 19. So much growth has happened in that time in general. And I think pole has had such a big impact on that as well. And I don't think I would be the person I am today without pole. And we always say that, like, just kind of like, it's almost, you just say it, but like, you really mean it. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
And I think today, like, as we talk about our journeys and like life lessons and stuff, I think, like, reflect on your journey and where you have come from, because like Renee, I've been pole dancing for 10 years. I started at 22, just after my first marriage. I was in a weird place. And yeah, I have had so much life growth, and I exaggerate that because it has been one fucking hell of a roller coaster. But I'm here and I've learned, and I think pole has really helped me with my confidence through that, which we'll explore a little later on.
I actually was having a conversation with a student the other day, and they were saying literally, like, I feel like I am growing so much and pole is helping me. Like, I feel like I have found my thing through pole, and I'm changing myself as a person through it. So that's like, it was just like the perfect timing for this episode as well.
And I have a lot of conversation with women, and because we are a female studio, and I tend to see a lot of relationships break down not long after people have started pole, or when they really start to find their place in pole. And I kind of like, I did a little bit of journaling on that at one point. I'm like, what is it about pole that we're seeing these breakdowns? And I think at some point, like, you just realize what you're worth. Like, you realize who you are as a person, and you discover yourself through pole. And look, this might happen when you do CrossFit or dance or whatever, but I don't know. I think pole's pretty powerful.
Pole is, it's because it you know, generally has a bit of a stigma attached to it. It's because there is so much growth. Like, sometimes when you go to CrossFit, it's like you just go to CrossFit or the gym, or like, it's not as much. Well, I'm not saying there's not, but like, I feel like the community aspect and, you know, the stuff that you go through with pole and the realization of your self-worth and confidence is a huge thing. Like, anytime you ask anyone what's pole given you, 100% most of them say confidence, rather than strength and, you know, fitness. Most people say confidence. So it's so much more than just a sport.
And one of the things that made me think about this episode in particular is we did some video marketing like 2 years ago now. It was pre-COVID. And we had one student on, and I didn't know her story before she came and did this video stuff. We had a bunch of questions we asked. And one of them was like, what has pole gifted you? And she's like, my life. Like, pole literally saved my life, because she was in such a bad place before starting pole. And pole had helped her realize that and make a bunch of changes. So, look, these are quite powerful things. And you might be listening and being like, Steph, Renee, like, I was going to pole, like, this didn't change my life. And like, that's your journey, and that's 100% okay too. You don't need to feel the things or have experience the things we're going to talk about today. We're just speaking from our experience and what we've
and the other, like, just another side of pole, pretty much.
Yeah. And like, I think, again, it's quite a powerful thing. So shall we dive on in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So
would you like to talk about what pole has given you and your life lessons?
Yeah, sure. Where do I start?
Make a coffee.
Yeah. Take a seat and grab a biscuit and a tea.
If you know anything about us, you know we like to talk, which is why we have a podcast.
And now it's story time. On that note, I was speaking to somebody last night. They want to start a podcast. And they're like, we just have these great D&Ms, and like, we just, like, why not put a microphone in front of us? And I'm like, That's exactly why we started.
That's how we started. That's literally how we started.
For me, I think there's probably two things. Probably realizing my self-worth and giving myself more credit than I probably would have had. My body, my abilities, you know, like, I've done things that I never would have thought of doing previously. I think it's helped me, like, doing competitions helped me, like, get really freaking good grades in my MBA when I had to do presentations, because I was like, who gives a fuck? Like, I've been on stage half naked, dancing in front of people. You just want me to deliver something I wrote?
True.
Easy. So, like, I had that confidence to be able to do those things. So it has really made me believe in myself.
That's so good.
Yeah, I think, and I see it in the people who come through the studio as well. So, and like, look, I've gone from, you know, being an entry-level position in a bank. It gave me the confidence to put myself out there in my corporate career, which got me into a really, really good position before I threw it in and brought a pole dancing studio, which also put me in a really good position.
So how would you say how long of this, like, when did you see the growth start to happen?
So for me, I started when I was 22. I think a really good indicator for it is my divorce in, I think I was like, it must have been, I need to work out years, must have been like 25, 26 maybe. And I think this is a little bit of a reason why my marriage probably broke down, is because I started gaining confidence, and I think I just grew and we didn't grow together. Anyway, that's a different story time. But that's when
that's
I really,
late nights.
that's late, yeah. That's when whenever we decide to do our wine night with Renee and Steph, welcome to the Power Hour.
We already have it planned out.
But I was starting to make decisions for me and not necessarily other people, but that's when I seen my confidence accelerate, my career accelerate, and my opportunities accelerate. So that is probably like the biggest personal thing for me. And I think, yeah, it's just really pretty cool. So what about you? What's one of yours?
For me is confidence and growth is some of the biggest things. Definitely like what you said before, is not realizing what you are capable of doing. Like I've always loved to move my body. I never thought I'd ever be doing what I'm doing now in terms of being upside down, and it's gymnastics that you look at crazy gymnasts and you're like, wow, that's so cool, but you're like, no way could I ever do that sort of thing. But in general, confidence, because like, I guess going from school and stuff like that, I didn't have a lot of confidence, like doing speeches in front of classes. I was always terrified of like maybe what people would think, or people would judge me, or any of that sort of stuff. I didn't have a lot of close female friendships at that point. And pole has been one of those things that, and I was actually talking to someone last night about that, a beginner student. It was like, I was always like, nah, like I just resonate more with the boys. I was really tomboy when I was younger. So I was like, nah, like I just am more of like I'm not a girly girl. I never did any of that sort of stuff. I wanted to be out there getting sort of like dirty in the mud, and and I just thought that that's what boys do and that sort of stuff. And then I went to pole and I was like, what the fuck, where have these women been hiding all this time? Like, I'm definitely resonating with women a lot more than men. Like, and and it's, I've got a lot of great male friends as well, and they're awesome. But I think that having some female friends and the level, the depth of conversation and the depth that you go into of sharing experiences, similar experiences, is where most of my confidence has been gained, because, didn't really have a super, super open childhood in terms of talking about things that society is thinks is you shouldn't talk about sex, for example. And I have the lovely Old Balls on Poles. We've done an episode with them. Not sure, they might listen to this episode, but they are the ones that they're, if you don't know who they are, they're on Instagram, but they're a group of women who are over the age of 40 that call themselves the Old Moles on Poles, and they just pride themselves in pole dancing, their little community, and just supporting each other and supporting pole in general. and they are not afraid to, like, they have so much lived experience, and they're not afraid to say whatever. And so I actually learned so much through there and gained more confidence in talking about, like, relationships and sex and, life in general, which has been such a big thing for me. And it's not like, oh no, like you have to kind of be like, I guess I grew up in a more conservative sort of way. And now I'm just like, nah.
There's a lot more discussion about sex.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's two things you talked about in there that I want to touch on. I want to come back to like the women thing. But there was something you said that, like, I just didn't care what other people think.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the biggest things we get by doing pole, and we see in our studio and ourselves is like, yeah, I think after I started doing pole, I started wearing fucking awesome stilettos to work because they're what I wanted to wear. Yeah. But I was afraid that people were going to judge me. I'm like, and this came up in our identity episode, but I'm like, fuck it. Yeah,
but it's the support you get, and you have people behind you and in your corner. I think that's like the biggest thing, because I still struggle with like feeling like I'm being judged or not good enough or like that sort of stuff, even within the pole world. And not everyone within the pole world is super nice either. Like you have people,
you're still not going to get along with everybody
everywhere, but in general, everyone's really supportive. So like, yeah, when I walk out of that pole world or when I'm in a different world. Like when I'm in society, I have a bit more confidence and to say things, because you just know you have your people, and like that the support is just more than anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like, coming back to the women's thing, I think I had such terrible experience with friendships groups in high school that I was a little bit like, I just get along with the boys. Like, I had one token female friend most of the time. But, like, I'm like, let me go play rugby with the guys down on the oval or whatever. That was my thing. But I think Paul has taught me that we can actually lift each other up. Like, I feel like for women, it's a really hard environment because we have been a minority in some capacity, and we don't feel like there's enough for everybody. And I think that comes up, like, through for most of us, and I think that's a societal thing, but yeah, like, it's actually taught me that I can have friends and I can have female friends, and they're not out to get me. They're not out to judge me. They're not out to like be better than me. They just there to be my friend. Yeah.
And also, like, it is given, like, when you have that community, it gives you the confidence for me to like even set boundaries, and that's like with stuff outside of pole, with my with your muggle jobs, I guess you say, like, when you want to work your way up in a certain way. And I feel like probably a lot of women might find this, that is they feel like always they have to say yes to everything, and that they have to be pleasers. Like, women in general are people pleasers,
not the shoes.
Yeah, people pleasers. And having that community and that experience for me is like helped me be able to set boundaries and say, no, this is what I want, this is what I expect. And that's like with friendships, with female friendships, with male friendships, with relationships, and this is not what I'm not going to tolerate this either. And in a respectful way, and not in like a super emotional way as well.
Yeah, being able to draw that thing. And like, as you talk about that, I come back to quite a few thoughts about my corporate life and my muggle life, where I was like, yeah, I just had to put my foot down and not to be, I was like a female in a male environment, and it was very challenging. But you can build that confidence to do that. And I think it's just like, I think about pole, and it's challenging but achievable. And I think this is where you get that like confidence loop, right? Yeah. Like, you're going and you're doing something scary and uncomfortable. Just walking into the goddamn class for the first time is super uncomfortable. So like, being able to
trying a new class or trying a new studio,
new instructor,
especially if you've had a great student, and then you're like, oh, I don't know what this studio is going to be like. They might already have their established friends and
we've done the episode about clicks and those types of things, and they all exist, but I think we're able to throw ourselves into uncomfortable situations because it is like such an interesting sport. It's not like touch, and it's like it's pretty repetitive, and like the situations you got to throw yourself in, yeah, there'll be some anomalies, but like they're pretty much the same. You're gonna run out, try to touch someone and run away, like, yeah, and you'll throw the ball, it might break your finger, it might not, like, it just depends. But like with pole, there's such a variety that you're constantly being pushed outside that comfort zone, and doing that is just growing your courage and growing your bravery.
And it also comes with, I find that the main benefits, I guess, of pole and class is those little moments where you get there and you're standing next to another person that's in your class and you're like, oh, how was your day? And, you know, you start to talk, and then because you're there every week for 10 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks or whatever your term is you're like, oh, like you start to get to know each other, and then you might go, oh, it's been a real shit day. And it's those conversations, and even with instructors, or like, oh, I don't feel really confident. I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I had suggested, when she was doing a trick, I'm like, oh, I think that having a little bit more skin grip on the side of your body would actually make this trick a bit easier. And I was saying it just very like matter of fact, like that, this is what you need to do. And then she was kind of like, oh, like maybe when I'm more confident. And then I was like, oh, what do you mean? Like, and I just didn't quite click. And then she was saying, oh, like I'd not feel quite confident to pull my pants up to that point, or to pull it, like, you know. And I was like, oh, and I was like, oh, of course. I'm like, okay, well, let's work around that. You know, you can also do it here. It is going to make it easier for skin grip for X, Y, and Z. But, you know, it takes time. And when you're ready, that is totally fine. And because she's like, well, I'm not like the other girls because of this. And I'm like, that's okay. Like, you don't have to feel like you need to do this right now. We can work on other things. You can do it without the skin grip. It's just going to be a little bit more tricky, but we'll work around that. So, you know, having those sort of conversations and getting on a deeper level with people, I find happens a lot in pole. Whereas, like Steph was saying, with like touch football or something, it's not really something that comes up, because you're not like, oh, I don't feel comfortable to run out there or throw the ball. Or
I think like when you're talking about that, what that comes to mind is like pole gives us the opportunity, gives us the choice to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And, you know, like being vulnerable is freaking scary. So being able to do that regularly, and being vulnerable, some people haven't shown their legs in years. Some people haven't exercised in years. But we progress slowly through all of that, and we can create trust with ourselves and trust with the communities and the environments to be able to continue to be vulnerable.
You also have to create trust with the instructors spotting you as well, in general. So there's a lot that goes into that. Yeah.
So I'm really, really curious to see what commonalities you have, because like even just talking like Renee and I, and we talked a little bit off air before we jumped on, but you know, it's for us, the biggest thing is confidence. We've seen that in our studio. Self-worth is another huge one. And yeah, like, so what we want to know, and we'll put a thing up this week, like, what are your life lessons from pole? Like, what has pole taught you? And, you know, they might not all be positive. I'm trying to think if I've had a negative lesson from pole.
Yeah, I didn't think of that.
No, neither did I. I only thought about that just then. We'll think about it and see if we can share. Depends on what the life lesson
There's been like lots of little, like, well, not lots, but there's probably been bits and pieces when you learn something about someone in particular, or, you know, I don't know.
But yeah, look, I think the biggest thing is like they are lessons. They are to be learned from. I don't think you should beat yourself up at any point. Like one of the things my therapist always says to me is like, Steph, how would you talk to your friend in this moment? And I'm like,
that's a good point.
Yeah, I hate you. Like, thanks, mate. But yeah, no, it is really important to remember there are lessons to be learned from. And we're all in this together in some capacity or another. So we will put some things out this week. We want to know what your biggest life lesson is from pole. What have you learned? How has pole made you the person today? And yeah, take some time to reflect. Talk to your pole buddies about it, to be like, even the pole instructor, who's your first pole instructor, like, do you remember me when I was like this? Like, I used to wear 2 bloody singlets to class because I didn't want to show my stomach. And now I'm like, loser. Any situation, I don't care. It's coming up. Anyway, come hang out with us on Instagram. We are at uncovered.pd. And if you're at this point of the recording, we know you are loving Uncovered. So have you left us a review? If not, go leave us a review. We love to hear them, we love to read them, and we love to chat. So hit us up on Instagram, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Nice little 20-minute.